Cool. I'm here with Vlad, and we're going to discuss building open source companies. They're YC company, Infisical, if I pronounce that right, and
Yeah,
they are well. You maybe tell where you are in considering open sourcing your code base and how you what questions you have.
yeah, I can tell you briefly about what Infisical is. So we're building Infisical, which is an open source end-to-end encrypted secrets manager. And we're used by developers to basically inject the right set of environment variables and secrets and configurations into their development flow, but also into their production environment, staging environments, and basically everywhere. So where we're at, we've open sourced Infisical around 7 weeks ago at this point, almost 8 weeks gonna be soon. It's going very interesting so far. Yeah, as you said, we're a YC company. We managed to get around 3,000 GitHub stars within like 7 weeks, getting like a lot of contributors, getting also like some people using us in production already, which is very, very cool.
Cool. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and it's functionality that partially overlaps at GitLab. We have environment secrets. There's other secret stores out there like Vault. Even 1Password
Yes.
has a dev secret store. But I think that what's really useful for end users if they can use the same secret store across many platforms and environments, and that seems to be what you're aiming for.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like something that differentiates us is, I would say, like mainly two things or three things, depending on like which other solution you look at. First of all, Infisical is obviously open source, so it's possible to be self-hosted, and people can inspect our codes. But on the other hand, like let's say like HashiVault is also open source. So what differentiates us from HashiVault is simplicity. It takes a lot of time and effort to set it up, and some companies are hiring external consultancies on how to do that. It's like a very complicated solution, and it's overkill for many companies. For some other players in the market, what differentiates us is that we're by default end-to-end encrypted, so we cannot see any of the secrets that customers store with us.
Cool. That makes a ton of sense. What can I try to answer on
Yeah.
open source?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because GitLab is obviously one of the best examples of open source companies probably in the world. So it's just very interesting to hear, like, how did you, like, I know a little bit of the story of like starting GitHub, but yeah, can you discuss any strategies that you used to increase the visibility of GitHub, like initially? And like, how did you manage to differentiate across like some other competitors, let's say?
Yeah, I think you just mentioned a competitor instead of GitLab, but yeah, we started GitLab. My co-founder started it as a purely open source project, and when I found it a year later, it was open source. I think to increase the visibility, we did a lot, but for example, we tried to make articles that were interesting to Hacker News. I think that was helpful, and I think there was a lot of similar demand as my co-founder, where people wanted to self-host something GitHub-like, and they didn't have a ton of budget because that was an expensive offering, and I think that's where we found our initial footing. And then as we grew, we tried to get a repeatable business model. In the beginning, it was donations, and later we tried a lot of other things, including consulting, paid for development. That didn't work, so we switched to kind of an open core model where some features are paid. That worked a lot better. That's higher margin, allows you to grow faster. And then it was like, okay, what features are going to be paid? And we thought about how much the maturity of the company, the size of the company that requested the features. Those didn't work, but what really worked was who cares about the feature? That person is higher up in the company. Then we put it in a more expensive package. And also, like if it's wanted by individual contributors, it's going to stay open source, and those new features will be open source. We call that buyer-based open core, and that ended up. That's where we're at now, and we think that's something that other companies can consider replicating.
Right. No, like this is interesting. I think my deal has a question about like the balance of features and yeah, I'll ask.
Yeah, so I was curious kind of how you guys approached kind of balancing the needs of an open source community and then kind of versus like the enterprise customers. Sometimes, you get like, because it's an open source community, you want to like give to the community, but at the same time, you need to also develop a business and to give features to enterprise customers. So I'm curious how you guys kind of approached that.
Yeah, thanks. I think one thing that's important is that the wider community has more open source code than there would be if there was not a commercial company behind it. Like if because of the company there's less open source to go around, that's not great. So when we started the company, we made everything open source, so it was very clear we would be contributing, and then on top of that, we started making features that were closed. Another way to look at it is the bio-based open core model. I think it's very natural if you have an application that most features, the greatest demand for them is from individual contributors who care most about it. So it's almost natural to have a huge part of your features, or it might work out to the majority of your features open source.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of tie into this previous question. So how did you go about setting your different goals and KPIs in the early days, right? Especially kind of, let's say that your product that's at the pre-product market fit stage. Yeah, what are the, and you, obviously you are an open source startup that's pre-product market fit. Do you focus on something more related to community growth, or do you focus, or do you directly focus on MRR and things of that nature?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we did with GitLab, we didn't have goals until we entered YC, when they were really strict, like have one goal. And they said revenue. We said, oh, revenue is too hard to influence directly. That wasn't true, but we thought it was, or we wanted to think it was. We did downloads for the first 6 weeks, and we grew downloads. And then we couldn't grow downloads fast anymore. So then we had to go to revenue. And then it turned out we could really influence revenue rapidly. So we were not right about that. But it was good that we were able to influence it, and we grew that. And since then, revenue has been the goal. Over a very long term, you're going to look more and more on profitability. So kind of net profit becomes a goal of a company. But I think that's a natural evolution. And then I also do something besides GitLab. It's called Open Core Ventures. And we're now trying a new set of quarterly milestones. In the first quarter, you focus on content marketing. The North Star is one blog post trending on Hacker News every 2 weeks. Then you look at contributor growth. Then you look at increasing installations or users. And then you start looking at revenue, and then it's revenue for many, many quarters after that.
Right. So what was it? What was wait? So was it at least some time before you guys started making the first dollars, or was that something that right off the bat was something that you guys were able to achieve? Because we've talked to a number of other open source startups as well, and it seems like it's kind of mixed. Some open source startups say that, oh, well, just focus on the community. Like they spent 8 months focusing in on that, and then it was like their first dollar after that. What are your thoughts on
for
that?
us, certainly there was a very long time in which we didn't focus on the dollars, but focused on other things. Dimitri started in 2011. I started in 2012. I bootstrapped it with my own money. So from 2012 to 2015, when we entered YC, there were years in which we focused a lot on addressing the needs of users, making sure there was a great contributor experience, and content marketing.
Cool. Yeah, and then kind of the other question I had was, what have been your experiences so far at GitLab with inbound versus outbound sales, especially for like an open source, developer focused company? Are there certain tactics that work better here?
In the beginning, it was mostly inbound. As we wanted to have larger companies and sell higher up, we have more and more outbound with sales people. And sell higher up, like I think it fits into bio-based open core. If there's someone higher up who cares about the product, you have typically more users and typically more revenue per user. And if you have both, it really increases kind of deal size and ARR per deal. And for that, typically those purchasing decisions are so complex. You need someone to help the customer navigate it. For example, we start now at GitLab with a value stream assessment. Like, hey, if we fit into your tool chain, like how is it going to change how you're going to derive more value and how you're going to get, according to a Forrester study, a 427% return on investment and a payback period of 6 months. So first help them make that business case, and only then after you've proven that, go for the sale. So yeah, that takes a lot of like salespeople, strategic account managers, but also solution architects who helps in like the pre-sale help make that picture.
Right. I see.
I'm
But for the
also
purposes,
wondering.
oh,
No, go ahead.
oh, no, but for the purposes of YC at our early stage, then would you recommend that we focus in on inbound sales?
I think that's typically how you start. And then you get more complex inbound sales where like there was interest, but you kind of lost touch and you're like, hey, why didn't we close this? And then you hire a first salesperson and they kind of help you with those deals. You're still involved as founders. And then that grows and you hire another one. And now you're like, have 3 salespeople to manage. You're like, oh, well, this is a little bit more than I bargained for. I need a manager for the salespeople. So I think in the beginning, it makes a ton of sense to work with the inbound and try to make those deals bigger and close them more reliably.
Got it.
I was also wondering, so if I remember correctly on the GitLab demo day video, like you were mentioning quite a lot of like famous logos. So were those inbound or outbound by you?
We had a ton of famous logos inbound. I remember my YC interview, and I just put on the cover of my laptop the logos in black and white because I couldn't find a color printer. But I'm like, if they take anything from this interview, they should at least look at all the amazing logos that are using GitLab.
Oh, so you even had them before YC. That's really
Even
cool.
before YC.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, Tony, did you have any questions or should I go?
No, I didn't have any other questions.
Okay. One that I have is like, how did you go about managing your community in the beginning? Like, did you use any special, basically like tricks, or was it just natural?
Well, certainly not tricks. I would
like tips, I mean.
Or tips.
Yeah.
I think the first thing is to not place yourself outside of the community. It's a bit, I guess, nitpicky, but I think you should realize you're part of the community. It's not something external of you that you own. Certainly, they're not owned by you. So I would say to consider yourself part of the community. Then maybe we talk about the wider community to talk about people outside the company. And then they want a couple of things. They want that you make it that it's really easy to contribute to it. So kind of time to merge of the PRs you're getting. They want recognition if they contribute something awesome. So for example, we have MVP every month and a Heroes program and things like that. A way to connect with other contributors like meetups and online forums. Access to information, like we're a very transparent company at GitLab, but also like talking with the PM and everything else about the plans. A sense of fairness in how you interact. We have our stewardship promises, for example, to help with that. I think those are things that come to mind that are important, apart from the obvious, like have a great Discord channel where people respond and things like that.
Right. No, we're actually using Slack. I think
or Slack or
like
IRC.
always.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because like for you, it already sounds so advanced. Like all these things that you're doing for us is still like very early. But I think like community managing community correctly is very important. Yeah. I was also wondering, how did you decide to make GitLab like a fully remote company? Yeah, does it have like any connection with like you being open source?
Yeah, and I don't like the verbiage, managing the community. You manage your reports. You don't manage a community. You more
Yeah.
help them and enable them. Regarding all remote, it wasn't some great plan. It just kind of happened over time. People stopped. We had a headquarters first. It was my home, and then it was a place in San Francisco. But people stopped showing up after 2 days because it was so easy to work from home. And at some point, we made that official. And right now, we realize that it's pretty simple to work remote. It's hard to work across time zones and to be inclusive in decision making without slowing down. So a lot of the best practices that we learned, they apply both to remote and not to remote. And we if you Google GitLab team ops, we have a kind of a course in the what we think are helpful best practices for any company, remote or not.
Yeah, sounds good. Michael, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I guess my last question is, if you could do YC over again, what would you what are some wisdom that you could give us, since we're going through it right now?
We had an amazing YC experience. I think my only regret is taking them a little bit literally. When they said don't fundraise, they meant don't spend 80% of your time fundraising. But at some point they say, oh, some people already fundraised, and that's great. And we're like, what? You told us not to fundraise. Same with the don't prep for your initial demo. They meant don't spend 80% of your time prepping. We didn't prep at all, and they declared us the worst demo ever given, I think, internally. So that wasn't great. But so that's the only advice. Don't take them literally, but try to understand what they mean. Don't get distracted from your top goals. But it's been a great experience for us. They bring great wisdom, a lot of help, but also great peers too. That greatly increased our ambition, and won't trade it for the world.
Very cool. Yeah, these were all the questions from our side, I think. Do you have any questions for us?
I think that Volt has two important parts. One of them is it does a great job kind of on kind of resilience for those secrets. Like you can have multiple servers, and if one falls away, it's still there. The other part, which I don't see in other systems, is that it's able to rotate secrets. And I think that's really important, because if you suspect you got breached, the first thing you'll do is rotate all the secrets. And that's super hard to do if you don't do it all the time. So if you want to do something correctly, like deploying, you got to just deploy all the time. If it hurts, do it more often. Is maybe the infrastructure saying JVR uses at GitLab. So that makes sense to me, but it seems Volt is the only thing that does that. Have you all seen some other technologies that help with rotating secrets?
There are sort of like attempts for rotating secrets, but I don't think it's like as advanced as Volt. It's definitely something that we don't have yet, but I think we'd love to have. I don't know, Tony or Madil, you want to comment more?
Cool, thanks for that. No other questions. Thank you. Bye.